10:05. Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. Coming up this morning at 10:35, Lubbock City Councilman Jeff Griffith will join us to discuss Lubbock's new stay-at-home order, or as I like to call it, the stay-away-from-other-people order. It's more of what it is. I mean, you can still drive around. They don't want you to be outside, but if you go for a Sunday drive, they're not going to pull you over and send the SWAT team over to your SUV or vehicle to pull you out. That's not going to happen. Even the Lubbock police tweeting out earlier, we're not just going to pull you over or stop pedestrians just because you're out and about. That's not going to happen. So it's more of a stay the hell away from other people order by Lubbock. Of course, other cities do have shelter-in-place orders. Joining us right now on the phones to talk about all of everything that's going on, coronavirus, politics, connected to coronavirus, and so much more. A good friend of the program, editor of Quorum Report, Scott Braddock. Scott, good morning. How are you today?
Making do in the era of coronavirus, Chad. Just trying to figure out exactly what all the rules and regulations are now, these emergency orders in all the different parts of the state, from Dallas to Houston to San Antonio to Austin and way on up to Lubbock.
Yes.
Everybody has a little bit different reality. And like you said, some of these are more like stay away from other people orders.
Yeah.
Others that say that they're shelter-in-place sort of orders really are also just stay away from other people orders. It's like in Houston, for example, where they have a quote-unquote shelter-in-place in Harris County. Interesting. I think people, and I don't think this is deliberate on the part of the elected officials, but when you see the county judge say that it's a shelter-in-place order, she means that. But then you also have Sylvester Turner, the mayor of Houston, running around telling people, look, the parks are not closed in Houston. You can still go to the park. You just need to stay away from each other.
Right.
Right? So stay 6 feet apart. It is a little bit, and like I said, I don't think that's anything nefarious on their part at all. I'm not saying anything bad about it. I just think it gives people an impression that of confusion. They don't know exactly what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, it's and I saw this debate. It was either Fox or CNN where they just said we don't have a good term for this because it's when you think shelter in place, and when if anyone ever uses shelter in place, it is don't leave your home. Mm-hmm. And very few places, at least here in Texas, are saying don't leave your home. In fact, a lot of them are saying, sure, you can leave your home, just stay away from each other.
Right. One of the things that I thought about over the weekend is just how hard I was on Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick last week, which I know he wasn't happy about, and he did some explaining about those comments he made on Fox News about the older population being maybe willing to, I'll just say it this way, maybe willing to sacrifice themselves for the economy and all of that. I think Lieutenant Governor Patrick is of the old school of politics, where, the kind of sacrifice that we have come to know in the United States, here in Texas and around the rest of the country, the kind of sacrifice we know is what? That you would give your life, or you would sacrifice something, physical, in exchange for helping others, right? I mean, this is the example that we saw from The Greatest Generation, for example, which, by the way, some of the people he's talking about are in The Greatest Generation. And this is a different kind of sacrifice. This isn't where you need to go out and, give up something about yourself, give up something about your own health so that other people will be better. The nature of the virus is that if you get it, no matter what age you are, by the way, you could then pass it on to other people. And, of course, it's the elderly population that would be more at risk of dying from it. But I think those who I would say it this way, and I almost mean this like a compliment to the lieutenant governor, which might shock you. The idea being that he's interested in self-sacrifice, and others might be interested in self-sacrifice. But the reality with this disease is that there's really no version of you doing that makes any sense for the rest of everybody else, because the reality with the virus is if you get it, you could pass it on to other people. So the kind of sacrifice we're talking about now is different. It's sacrifice where you just stay home and do everything you can to not get the thing.
Yeah. Let's see, Scott.
It's just a weird. It completely upends. I guess what I'm saying is it completely upends everybody's understanding of what self-sacrifice is.
Yeah.
Right.
In
this case, it's just that you are trying to, because if you or I get the disease, Chad, we're probably going to be okay, probably. I mean, we might get pretty sick, but we wouldn't die. But other people that we might pass it on to,
Sure.
that would be a different story. And by the way, over the weekend, I had gotten reports out of Houston, some other places, just hearing personal stories of some people who now know folks who have passed away, names you wouldn't know, just average people. But a friend yesterday was saying, that they were on the phone with one of their good friends, and that person's parent had passed away from it. So it's becoming a lot more real for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yesterday, the governor had another press conference in which now people driving in from Louisiana are not going to be allowed to come in, which I think he should have done this when he first banned, the air travel. But this is better now because a lot of people do drive to Louisiana.
I mean, I guess it was sort of mocked when the governor first unveiled the idea that he was going to require self-quarantine for anybody who was traveling via airport from the New York tri-state area and from NOLA, from New Orleans. And immediately people started to say, well, how many people drive from New Orleans to Houston all the time? It's really not that far a drive. I think it's 5 hours, 6 hours if you get run into traffic. You can be in New Orleans, drive to Houston, and probably be checked into your hotel in about 5.5 hours. So if people are coming in from Louisiana, I think having some sort of roadway restriction. I mean, if this is really what you're trying to do, keep anybody who might possibly be carrying the disease from Louisiana, you'd want to do it on the roads as well. So he talked about that and added that as part of an executive order in his press conference on Sunday. He had a few other things to say as well, Chad, about the fact that they're now establishing what they're calling sort of these pop-up facilities in case there is overflow from hospitals at the K. Bailey Hutchison Convention Center, the Dallas Convention Center, which is right there in downtown Dallas. That's going to be equipped to take about 250 people right off the bat, which doesn't sound like a lot, but they can, of course, expand very quickly there. It's a large facility if they needed to, stand up more hospital beds there. The governor also said that, and by the way, these numbers are constantly changing, so people, you don't need to write these down and remember them or anything, but you get a sense of, where we're at. The governor said yesterday that we're at about 25,000 or so who have been tested, and we're still at about 10% of those who are tested turn out to have COVID-19. Most of those contracted the virus due to personal contact prior to the state's local shelter-in-place orders, prior to those orders in Lubbock and Dallas and Houston and other places. And so, this is still growing. We're starting to still trying to figure out what the real picture is of people in this state who have COVID-19. As the testing continues to ramp up, we'll continue to have a better idea of how many people really have it. But as we've talked about on the show previously, you're kind of flying blind when you don't have a lot of tests out there. And there is the complaint that you're hearing from a lot of folks that the testing in Texas is taking up to 10 days, 12 days in some cases. Yeah. When in other places they've been able to test people a lot faster.
Yeah, and so again, I mean, we're not going to see numbers that deal with the quarantining and the staying away from other people. We won't see those numbers really even start to flow in until maybe later this week?
Yeah, it could be later this week or even into next week before that happens. And I think some of what is driving the anger out there among some folks is the fact that we don't have real, reliable data that we can put in front of the public about how many people really have the disease and what the real threat is to that at-risk population, Chad. If we had a better handle on the testing and people really had a good picture of just how many folks out there maybe really are carrying this disease, maybe really do have the disease and therefore end up being hospitalized because of it, then I think people might be more accepting of some of the restrictions that have been put in place in some of our local communities. But in the absence of that, I think it probably breeds more anger out there because people say, well, this isn't that big a deal. Well,
yeah.
Give it a week or two, and it may turn out to be, I think it probably will end up to be a much bigger deal.
It's been a while since you and I have talked about, that old thing called politics.
Yeah.
But there is some political news attached to coronavirus, of course, and that is
Sure.
the Republican and Democrat state conventions in Texas.
just last week, and this is never thought I would type this as a headline, but the Texas Democratic Party, they've said they're going to take their convention and just do it all online. And we don't have all the information about exactly how they're going to do that just yet, Chad. Of course, the parties in Texas are massive compared to parties in other states. You know, we just have a lot more Democrats and a lot more Republicans than they have in a lot of other places. But Democrats said they're going to take their deal online. The Republican Party of Texas has said that they are moving their convention back a couple of months. They're going to wait, instead of doing it earlier. I don't know, and I think in April, the SREC, the State Republican Executive Committee, is going to get together and vote on this new date, which I don't have in front of me, but this new date for the Republican Party of Texas convention. I think at that meeting, when the SREC gets together, they probably will, and who knows what they'll end up deciding, but they probably will at least have to float the idea of having the Republican convention also be online or do it in some other fashion, because, I mean, who knows, Chad, but I can't imagine with the trajectory of all this that we're really going to be in that much better place a couple months from now when it comes to all this social distancing and the bans in various cities on how many people can get together in one place. You know, Houston's been fairly aggressive in trying to clamp down on these big groups getting together. They were one of the big cities that jumped on that fairly early, and that's where the Republican Party of Texas convention is scheduled this year.
Scott, tell folks so they can find it quorumreport.com.
We'll be tracking your state government's response to all of this. One of the things that we want to look into is what's happening with construction all around the state. It looks like there are still buildings that are going up in the big cities and in other places as well. And so it's still an essential business, if you will, to be building these things. But, of course, there's health concerns for the workers, and we're gathering numbers on that now. And that's also an economic indicator, Chad. This is potentially one of those make-or-break weeks, not just for Texas, but for the United States, because this is the week, with the first of the month coming up. This is when bills are coming due. People have credit card bills that are due, rents due, all that sort of stuff, and that money hasn't started to flow yet from the federal government. So a lot of businesses have the crunch right now, and we're covering all that at quorumreport.com.
Very good, Scott. Appreciate it. Stay healthy. We'll visit with you next week.
Same to you, Chad. Talk soon.
All right, that's Scott Braddock, editor of quorumreport.com. We'll take our break. When we come back, a story that was just sent to me from Campus Reform.